why do we use light? At a basic level, we need light to expose an image on our camera sensor. No light, no image. But when we add light, do we use hard light or do we use soft light? What color temperature should this light be? Why is it this time of day? To find the answer to these questions, we only really need a basic understanding of one thing: the intent of our image or scene. To figure out why intent is so important, we're going to work backwards. Let's say this is the final scene of a film. A man sits at the back of a pub around sunset time, and he gets served a drink and starts to take a sip. Let's also say we have a few other versions of this scene that follow the same structure, but are lit a little differently. This one is also quite warm, but instead of sunset, we're in the pub at night, and the interior lamps are giving us a softer, yet moody look. The close-up of our subject highlighted against a darker background. This one is a lot cooler in tone, representing a cloudy evening, or blue hour post-sunset. The lack of detail in our shadows and the cooler tones lending to an even darker mood. So, which lighting option would we pick for the scene? Let's go for this one. It feels the most like a recognizable, cozy pub interior. But wait, we don't even know what this scene is about. We've just picked the shot we think looks best to our eye, unrelated to meaning or story. And by ignoring meaning or story, and lighting purely for aesthetics, we risk breaking part of the thread that weaves everything together. Lighting can do more for our work than just look good if we use it in tandem with other creative elements. So first, let's clarify roughly what our story is, and for the purposes of this tutorial, we can choose something quite basic. Maybe we're looking at a character who has previously struggled with addiction, recovered from it, and in our final scene, maybe about to have a setback or relapse. Although we do have somewhat of a darker feeling mood in our initially chosen shot, the cozy warm interior feeling might not represent what we're trying to convey in the scene. What about our other two options? We know that colour is a good way to inform emotions, and cooler colours like blue often imply feelings of sadness or darkness. So maybe a cloudy or post-sunset evening fits this scene better. But while dark shadows and cooler tones are a great visual indicator of darker feelings, it doesn't necessarily mean it works for this particular story. The story is about a specific character after all, and maybe simply using a cold, gloomy evening isn't the right way to convey his emotions. The scene taking place at sunset might actually be the best option for the story. But why? The initial use of a substance or drug may carry with it good feelings and happy memories. This is also something we can convey visually, as we generally find things like sunset to be both pleasing but also nostalgic. These feelings can often be connected, and here it works for our story in more ways than one. This sunset doesn't just have to represent one moment in time. It can carry through to different points of our character's life as he undergoes the stages of dependence and addiction, tying these key moments together, both literally and metaphorically, showing our character's drinking nostalgia, but also a pattern for us to recognize. We could still use cooler lighting to represent a different aspect of the story, like when showing the recovery. If it's a tough time for our character, this might better reflect his mindset and the struggle to overcome. Once we get to our final scene, the visual language we've developed for the addiction returns and indicates what's likely going to happen as soon as we see the image. The sunset has functioned as a literal way to light these scenes and to pick up on a pattern, while at the same time, we've been experiencing our characters drinking nostalgia in a more metaphorical sense. It all links back to a particular time in his life. And you may have noticed something else. The sunlight throughout these scenes gradually gets brighter, harder, less saturated, and moves further around the face, casting more shadow. This could be a subtle way to show the progression of our character's addiction. It also tells us that the setback in the final scene may not be a small one, even if our character has put the effort into recovery. We haven't returned to square one. Instead, the pattern of light or addiction is still progressing. This might not bode well for our character, and it's something our audience may pick up on, consciously or subconsciously. Either way, the visual language of lighting we've developed remains coherent to the story and forms part of the whole. And that's not to say we can't use either of the other options, even in tandem with the earlier sunlit scenes. What matters is intent, how we feel the story needs to be told visually, and whether that's through careful analysis, intuition, or a mix of both. Lighting can help us do this, and it's one of the main reasons we might light an image. So how do we light our shots? We utilised natural sunlight for most of them, but used our own lighting for this shot, and the final shot, without which we couldn't have carried across our visual language, since the sun wasn't shining through the location's windows in the way we needed. We needed fairly powerful lighting for both setups to replicate sunlight. Here, we used the Forza 720B FL20G Fresnel lens attached, directing a beam of light into the room and onto our character, making sure the sunlight hit his face in a way to carry on our lighting pattern throughout the sequence. To achieve our intended look in the final scene, we used a Nanlux 1200B with its FL35 Fresnel lens, pushing our sunlight through the back window. This was set to around 4000 Kelvin for some slight warmth, but not too warm, to ensure our sun was cooler than the previous scenes. Our second light added a little more detail to our background and some visibility to the face. This was a Forza 60C reflector dish attached, firing into a 4x4 frame of bleached muslin material. This was set to a similar colour temperature as our sun. Our third light continues this subtle wrap around the face, giving us further detail. This was another Forza 60C, shot through some bleached muslin material, hung in front of our subject, set to a similar colour temperature as our previous two lights. The setup forms a wrap of light around our subject from the sun, and since these lights are much dimmer than our sun, we can retain some detail on his face, without interfering with our higher contrast, an important aspect of the lighting to convey our character's journey. Episodes of Lighting for Cinema are extended and released early over on my Patreon, along with extra videos and access to the Discord server.